You know that Keeley Companies is all about fostering the world-class culture through their incredible cultural pillars. Well, it was time to add a seventh cultural pillar, Keeley Green. Guided by the mission to raise the sustainability standards by which they design, build, operate, and live, Keeley Green is dedicated to using a holistic approach to leave a positive impact on our environment, create a future that is sustainable for generations to come. In the words of Rusty Keeley, we are just getting started. You can learn more about that just getting started mentality and all the work they do by visiting my friends at Keeley Companies online at KeeleyCompanies.com.
Welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. John is the #1 national best-selling author of the book On Fire. He's a world-class inspirational speaker, and he's the host of the Live Inspired podcast. John interviews extraordinary individuals on their life story so that you can wake up from accidental living and more fully live your life story. Here's your host, John O'Leary.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. Today's guest is going to absolutely inspire you to live more fully in your life. I love this guy. I love his story. So let me tell you more about why. Damon Dunn is a former NFL wide receiver. He's a Stanford scholar. He's a powerhouse entrepreneur and a man who never forgot where he came from. Raised by his grandparents in a trailer with 10 other people living there, Damon grew up boiling bathwater on the stove, eating mayonnaise sandwiches for food, and sleeping 3 per bed. Today, though, he is a successful CEO. He's a real estate developer. He's founder of multiple businesses and a leader committed to serving those facing similar uphill battles that he once faced. In this conversation, Damon shares how an 8-year-old boy watching a Dallas Cowboys game sparked a vision in his mind and heart that carried him out of poverty and into a life of purpose. He opens up about growing up with his parents no longer with him, losing family members to prison, and the mentors who showed up to help him shape his character. It's an incredible story. He talks candidly about identity loss after football, rebuilding his career from the ground up, and leadership values that continue to guide him as a father, as a CEO, and as a difference maker today. Brothers and sisters, family and friends, if you have ever felt stuck in your circumstances, like your dreams are just a little bit too far out of reach, or if you're just ready for a shot of bold, heart-centered inspiration, today's conversation is for you. You are going to leave this baby renewed with clarity, a fire to keep you going, and a reminder that even in the most unlikely stories, you can lead directly into extraordinary places going forward. So let me loop in my friend, and now yours. His name is Damon Dunn. Damon, brother, welcome to Live Inspired with John O'Leary.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Man, I'm on with a friend already, but for the friends who are listening to our conversation or watching our conversation who have not yet met you, they don't know your background. And if you were to meet them, I don't know, let's say a Stanford football game. Let's just say we're cheering, man.
Yeah.
And they say, Damon, tell me about you. How do you answer that today?
I would say to understand me, if you really want to understand me on a deeper level, you have to understand where my life started. Because I think a lot of who we are is fed into us in those first 8 to 10 years of our lives. So my mom was 16 when she had me. My father was killed when I was 3 years old. And I lived with my grandparents, and we lived in a trailer with 10 people. We didn't have hot water. We had to boil water on the stove and pour it into the bathtub. And we took turns taking baths. I was on free and reduced lunch, getting clothes from the Salvation Army. And saying all that, there was that spirit of poverty. There was an element of hard work and of grind and of grit. A lot of things I had to learn, a lot of humility. But I was able to work on from there and get a full football scholarship to Stanford University and go on to play in the NFL. And now I've been the CEO for 3 different companies. But if you ask who I am, I'm the kid that saw beyond the plausible and probable outcomes for my life. And I was able to see what was possible. I became a possibilitarian, believing beyond what my socioeconomic circumstances would tell you that who I could be. And that is an ultimate theme throughout my entire life, seeing beyond the probable and plausible and being able to see what's possible.
That's the kind of introduction when I'm at a football game. I've stopped watching football and I turn fully 90 degrees to the guy next to me. So that's what
Yeah.
I'm doing right now because I want to hear more about what you're doing right now in your life,
Yeah.
but also how you got here. I mean,
Yeah.
you talked about your mom and a trailer and losing your dad and boiling water. So let's go back in time. There's some research around you become the average financially of the five people you spend the majority of your life with.
Yeah.
So you become like your four neighbors and your uncles and parents and siblings. Like you become like these people, and yet you did not. So it's so rare to truly break free of those chains. So let's go back in time a little bit. Yeah, you're in this trailer. You're 3 years old. What's your life like? Describe for us who may never have seen anything like this. What your life was like.
We had animals that we would grow them and then we would slaughter them and we would sell them for food. And so we had cows and goats and pigs and chickens. And so every morning we'd have to get up at 5 a.m. and feed all the animals. And then when we came home from school, 5 p.m., we had to feed all the animals. We didn't have television. We basically lived in a trailer, a 3-bedroom trailer. And my grandmother in the winter would open up the oven so that she could keep it warm, and we'd have to eat mayonnaise sandwiches 3-4 days a week because we didn't have food. So it was an environment where it was a lack of everything. But if the biggest lack would be the ability to dream.
Mm.
Being a kid and watching people in my trailer where I grew up, watching my uncles graduate high school and move right back into the trailer park, and watching the other kids graduate high school and moving back into the trailer park, you start to realize like nobody knows how to get out of here. My grandparents don't know how to get out of here. My uncles don't know. The other people in the other trailers don't know. And so there was a little bit of hopelessness. And I was like, God, just show me a sign, give me something, help me have a vision of somehow I can get out. And I got my dream when I was 8 years old. And I was watching the Dallas Cowboys play the Washington Redskins. And the announcer said that Tony Dorsett earned a full football scholarship to the University of Pittsburgh. And that became my dream. And I took that and I wrote it on a piece of paper that I'm going to be an All-American football player and earn a full football scholarship. I taped it to the top of my ceiling above my bed with my two uncles whom I slept with. We were sleeping three to a bed at a time. And every morning it was the first thing that I saw. And every night it was the last thing that I saw. And manifesting is real. The ability to be able to create short-term goals, have a vision for where you want to go and be maniacal about it. Those people tend to get there.
You mentioned your two uncles that you're laying next to. What became of those two men?
One went to prison for murder, and the other went to prison for armed robbery.
So this is your family.
Yeah,
These are your guys, man. These are your friends. And one goes to prison for murder and the other one armed robbery. And yet you've got a picture of Tony Dorsett in the
that's right.
University of Pittsburgh and a college and ultimately NFL dream in front of you. And somehow that keeps driving you and drawing you forward. Your mother disappeared for almost a decade of your life.
Yeah.
What was that like for you when she wasn't there? And ultimately, what was it like for you when she returned?
It's funny. The answer to that question changes over different decades of my life, how I look back and see what it was like for me during that window of time when my mom was not there. I'm living with my grandparents, and all my uncles are her real children. And I knew that I wasn't the real child. And there was a lot of identity, issues that I faced, a lot of insecurity that I faced. My father was killed when I was 3. So we would have parent teacher days, and my grandparents weren't comfortable coming to school and talking to the white people. They would tell us, don't make us have to come up there and talk to those white people because they really weren't literate. They didn't finish high school. It was a place of insecurity for me, and not having my mom, I kind of felt like she didn't want me, and she would come and see me and then she would leave and leave me with $10 or $20, and it hurt. I eventually got to a point to where I would tell my grandmother I don't want to see her. She would come and I would leave and go back up on the land where we were, and go shoot BB guns with my uncles because it was painful to watch her leave. I wanted to be out of there, and she
Yeah.
was living in a normal place with running water, and I just didn't understand why she couldn't take me with her. And so it was a lot of pain, and I've dealt with a lot of unresolved issues with not having a dad and not having a mom in my adult life. And I had an opportunity to be in therapy for 5 years that helped me kind of work through a lot of those issues. I think it's impacted the proximity that I have with my mom. When you miss those toddler years, you don't have the same intimacy. I have 2 kids now, and it's hard to imagine missing those ages from like 2 to 6 because
Yes.
there's so much intimacy that's developed in that window of time.
And I always tell my wife if she moves out on me, I'm moving with her. Like in part because I'm wild about her, but in part because I got to be around my babies, man. Like I need to hold them as close as I can. And now that you are a father, now that you've held your babies, you recognize also what your mother was giving up too. In fact, looking back on it was a sacrifice. She shows back up in your life now more wholly when you're 11. What was that like?
So, like I said, different decades, I see it differently now. Now, how I see my mom coming back for me, she was 16. She's a kid. She's a kid having a kid. She didn't know how to raise a kid. She was the first person in our entire family to go to college. So, my grandparents made the sacrifice to keep me so my mom could go on to college. And when she came back to get me at 10 years old, I was going on 11 years old. She then showed me the path on how to get to college, how to make good straight A's, how to have good study habits. So she made a sacrifice. My grandparents made a sacrifice as well to give me the opportunity to have a good start in life. And now I look back on that and see that my mom, wow, that was hard on my mom to leave her son. And all I could see when I was going through it, though, is that my mom didn't want me and I didn't
Mm.
understand why. And I was hungry and I was tired and sleeping with three people in one bed. And I couldn't see the sacrifice at the moment. But now I see it and what she did. And I wouldn't be where I'm at today without my mom. She became the person that was a standard for me.
I've heard you talk in the past about prodigious expectations.
Yeah.
To talk about being an 11-year-old kid with prodigious expectations, where were you even getting this idea of what you could possibly do when you're looking to your left and seeing one uncle who's going to go off for armed robbery, and then you look to the right and you see another uncle who's going to about to be arrested for murder?
Yeah.
Those are the expectations you should have.
Yeah.
But instead, this little boy has prodigious expectations. Would you talk
Yeah.
about that?
It was the dream. The worst part, John, about being poor is that you don't have access to good information. No one knows how to become a lawyer. No one knows how to become a doctor. No one knows how to go to college. No one knows how to get a loan or be an entrepreneur or understand underwriting or knowing what all the industries are out there that you could actually get trades in and do something with your life. So literally, I had one vision of one dream, and that was getting a scholarship. And that fed me for all of my youth. And when I went back to Harvard Business School and I sat in on a psychology class and they did an experiment where they took two rats, one in a container of water and left no way of escape. And it swam around for 15 minutes and then it tucked its head and prepared to drown. And another one, they put four ways of escape, but just outside of the rat's reach. And it swam around for 6 hours before it prepared to drown. So it swam around for 5 hours and 45 minutes longer than the other rat because we normally think that as long as there's life, then
Hmm.
there's hope. But what that rat showed and what the experiment showed is that no, as long as there was the hope of getting out, he swam around for 5 hours and 45 minutes longer. So it's that hope, something that makes you believe, something that lets you see beyond the trailer park, something that
Hmm.
allows you to see beyond your socioeconomic status, the things that aren't in your life today. You have to continue to work through those vicissitudes and the pain and the loss and the hunger. Something's got to drive you. And for me, it was that dream. It was the dream of getting a football scholarship. That was the only way that I knew to get out. And that hope mattered more than anything else because without it, you just ended up like my uncles.
I've heard you share in the past a story about when you were goofing off, and you and I would have got along well as kids
Yeah,
because we would have both been in the hallway, you on the
yeah,
left, me on the right.
yeah,
You were goofing off, and the teacher finally kind of drags you out, throws you in the hallway. Now you're outside. The kids are in the classroom learning, and a custodial staff member walks by.
yeah, yeah. And I normally tell this story without the race piece in it, but I'm going to tell the real story today. It was mostly a white school, and the teacher kicked me out of class because I was being disruptive. And I'm sitting in the hallway and I'm eating a lollipop. I pull a lollipop out of my pocket, and you shouldn't be doing that either. And there was a janitor, a black janitor that worked there, and he never talked to the kids. He just did his job in silence. And that day, he saw me sitting outside that classroom, and he stopped at me and he says, "You know what I see in there? I see a bunch of white kids in there learn how to be your boss." And that hit me deep to my core in a way in which it said, "You know what? I'm going to change my expectations. I'm going to focus when I'm in school." And he was right. And sometimes you just need something to rock you emotionally
Hmm.
and to rock you from a psychological perspective. I would say that milestone in my life has kind of really formed a lot about who I am.
It's one thing to have a picture of Tony Dorsett. It's another thing to slowly become him. So I
Yeah.
have a question first around athletics and then around academics, because Either one of them is remarkable, and you did both well.
Yeah.
But athletics, when did you recognize that it wasn't just a dream, that you actually had the gift and the talent and the work habits to become truly great?
You get that belief on the journey. That's why you can't wait until you believe it. You start working. I signed up for Pee Wee football, and I started staying after practice, and I started asking the coaches, for how I could improve. And I would do drills at home. And as you got better and you showed that you improved, you got to play more. And as you played more, you start making plays in games. And now the momentum starts. And then that momentum builds more momentum, and you keep working at it, and you keep getting better at every single level. And so I would say the confidence and the belief in myself came on the journey. I had to get it while I was going. It was never going to all be there at the beginning. And there are a lot of people who at the very beginning decide that they can't do something. And there's an insecurity because I'm Black and I can't go to Stanford, or because I'm poor. Poor people don't get an opportunity to be CEOs of a company, or I'm a woman, I can't run a Fortune 500, or I'm gay, they won't accept me. And then we die with all of these things on the inside of us, books that were never written, relationships that were never started, companies that were never started because of the insecurities that we have. So it's really important to get going, and you'll gain the belief as you go.
Mm. I have a feeling you're going to give a similar answer, but I'll ask it anyway. Academically, talk about this kid from a trailer park with a couple uncles on both sides growing up to become a man who is just brilliantly astute in the classroom and in life. Where did you recognize like you had this gear to elevate your life?
There was a part of this, things came easy to me when I was young. So I don't want to discount that and say that it was all hard work and all studying. But once you get to a certain level, it does become just about hard work and study habits and the work that you put in. But early on, some things came easy to me. And then the other piece that really ignited my fire to want to be good academically is that I was competitive. Like I wanted to make 100%. And I was a kid asking, what'd you make? What did you make? And so I wanted to have the highest grade in the class. So I was very competitive, along with having the natural gift of being able to see things come easily to me. And once you get to probably high school, when you start taking AP classes, everyone in the AP classes are equal. And then the differentiator is how much work you put in and the quality of the work that you put in. And then by the time you get to Stanford, it's understanding that my college roommate, he could go to our econ classes and he could just do the homework at home. He could read the book and make an A. I had to be in study groups. I had to work with tutors. I had to do all that to make A's, but I learned to leverage tutors to make A's and not just to make C's. And so finding different ways to get to the end outcomes, being savvy, that really mattered most, the higher levels. And even now, being in business and having worked with private equity, it's really about understanding there's multiple ways to get to an outcome. How can you get to that outcome, and been wise enough to sort through all the solutions to do that?
You're this kid from outside of what, Dallas, essentially, struggled mightily academically at first, educationally at first, athletically at first, financially for a long time at first, and now you're on Stanford's campus.
Yeah.
So I've been there twice.
Yeah.
And both times I was there, as I'm walking around, if I'm being real with you, I'm like, dude, I don't even belong here. That's
Yeah.
kind of how I felt. What was it like for you? This kid who came from so little to then be brought onto campus as a football player, as an academic leader. Like, did you feel like you belonged?
Yeah, one day I'm going to write a book, and it's going to be about class jumping, socioeconomic class jumping. Because when you're really poor, you have poverty as a language, right? I was using the N word like every third or fourth word because everyone around me used the N word. I never went to the doctor. I never went to the dentist. I didn't know what good study habits really looked like. Most of the kids at Stanford came from private schools. And so being in that environment, it was like drinking from a fire hydrant. It was just all coming at me so fast. I jumped up into that socioeconomic class, and it was a big adjustment for me, but I learned to adjust on the go, right? You didn't learn everything at once. You learned better study habits as progressed after your freshman year. You learned how to socially interact. I was insecure because I grew up really poor, and most of these kids had money. It was like $95,000 to go to Stanford. And so I didn't really feel comfortable talking to girls because I didn't want them to know where I came from. The football environment was really good for me because I had a bunch of teammates and I had a tribe of people that accepted me for who I was and how I showed up and presented myself in that environment. But the classroom environment, I'd never been around professors that were really that smart. I never had homework assignments that were that long, and I never been around people that studied for 30, 40 hours a week. And I had to build up that muscle and build up that endurance and build a skill. Like, for example, for me, I learned that if a paper was due on a certain date, if I got the thesis down and my three supporting points and my counterpoint and my conclusion, I could go sit down and talk to my professor about it. And they're effectively grading my paper then. And they're telling me, no, go this direction, change this. So then I would go back and I would work with the tutor because the athletic department provided tutors for free for athletes. And then I'd finish the paper, turn it in, and I would get A's. So I put together a system. And I think that you never rise to your expectations, not as much as you fall to your systems and your structure. And so that's what I learned at Stanford. I had to put structure and systems in place to succeed. And that thought process there has really served me well in the businesses that I've run and playing in the NFL and a lot of other things I've achieved. You fall to the level of your systems and your structure more than you rise to the level of your expectations.
You're buzzing quickly through your life, and it's about an hour-long show, so we have to. Was there a coach, a mentor, a roommate, a friend, an ally, whether in high school or at Stanford, that just got a hold of you and showed you the path forward?
Yeah, Bill Walsh recruited me from Stanford, and had Bill Walsh not been at Stanford, I probably wouldn't have gone there because he was like, you know what, you come here, you're going to get a great education, and also I can make one phone call and you can play in the NFL. And so it made sense for me that I could be just as successful in sports or outside of sports, and that proved to be true. But my sophomore year, Ty Willingham came in, and he was the first African American male man that I'd seen that had such a high level of integrity. What he did in private is exactly what he did in public. The way that he went about his work, the way that he cared about us as complete students and not just as football players. We had to turn in our grades. He monitored our classroom attendance. He really showed me what it was like to be a man. He was the father figure in my life because I didn't have a father. And that image, we all eventually start to project relationships. You grew up with a father, and so maybe you had that whole relationship, but even when you get out as a man, you remember the things that your father showed you, or you just act in those ways. For me, it was Ty Willingham, and I began to project what that looked like for me. And that began the journey of me being a man, what I wanted to be, the same in private as I was in public, having high integrity, earning everything that I got, looking for it the hard way, not the easy way, and putting in the reps and the work, man. Like, he showed me that hard work works.
Mm. Man, whether you're 12, 15, 18, 22, when you're 39 and you retire out, at some point, the dream of playing football or any athletic sport will eventually fade.
Yeah,
You played with the Jaguars, Browns, Jets, Cowboys. So
yeah.
you had some success, certainly in college and in the pros. Eventually, though, that fades. How hard is it to go from Sunday morning NFL work
Yeah.
to now we move into corporate America? How difficult of a crossover is that?
That's a great question. When I was at Stanford, I served for 3 years at Jerusalem Baptist Church and I oversaw the youth and middle school. So I had this really good foundation of, I'm Damon Dunn, the child of God, not Damon Dunn, the football player. And I realized that when the game ended, I realized, like, wow, my family treated me differently because I played football, right? They prioritized me. They were proud of it. They told everybody about it. And I was able to date girls that were impressed with the fact that I played football. And I was able to get opportunities and internships in between my years because I played football for different teams, and business owners will want me around in their local markets, in their local communities. And when I left the game, I realized that I had become Damon Dunn, the football player. And when that was taken from me, I went through depression, and I didn't realize why, but I had to figure out who I really was, and that those were things that I did. I was playing football and I went to Stanford, but that's not who I am. And that journey was a 2 year window for me. So I would say on an emotional and a psychological level, it was difficult and challenging and painful to work through. And then from a career perspective, when you're at Stanford and you're graduating undergrad, they have the Career Academic Resource Center. They have the Alumni Association where companies come on campus and you can go interview for different jobs. They have job fairs. But when you leave the NFL and you're 5 years out, you can't go back to Stanford and go to those job fairs and go to those events that are dedicated for juniors and seniors in college. And so you're out on your own. And this is every NFL player. They don't have a transition program for people to transition into life. And unfortunately, what you did in the NFL doesn't serve as some type of job experience or career experience that you can roll into being an investment banker or roll into being an accountant or roll into having any job. And so you have to start over from ground zero. And that was really hard, but I was able to leverage the relationships I had to create an opportunity for myself. My college roommate happened to be leaving a company, and we went to his father and asked his father if he would back us financially to be real estate developers. And his father had built over, $1 billion worth of retail development for Walmart and a lot of large scale commercial clients. And so he backed us financially, got us into the business, and then my career took off from there.
Is that Tricor?
That was Tricor. Yep. His company was Tricor International. Funny story, though, I'll tell you, John. When we started, we called our company Second Half Development because we thought it would tee us up to talk about football because I was playing in the NFL or I just finished. And what we realized 8 months in is that nobody would give us any opportunities because we had a company with no track record, no investment history, and no development history. And so we went to his father and we were like, you know what? You're Tricor International. Can we call ourselves Tricor Southwest Corporation? Now we go from a company with no track record to a company with over $1 billion of development experience over the last 30 years. And we're opening up the Southwest division of that out here in the United States. And immediately that gave us credibility and we started to be able to secure opportunities.
You pivot eventually to Sagan Sign.
Yeah, I do.
Talk about that.
Yeah. So I started off in real estate development and we ended up selling all of our real estate. The market crashed in 2008. We built over $165 million worth of deals. And so I had some good capital. So I didn't really work for 7 years, 32 to 39. I kind of had a midlife retirement. And then I decided to get back into work. And honestly, the second thing that happened is I worked for some guys named Brad Freeman and Ron Spogli. They have a large private equity company called Freeman Spogli. They invested $30 million behind me back in 2016. And we opened up 38 Dunkin' Donut stores. And I had 38 stores across 6 states. We were doing 35 million in sales. And so that company I ran for 7 years and I exited that company in November of 2023. And then again, I kind of took off for retirement for like a year and a half. I did my first keynote speech in August of 2024. I knew the CEO from Fast Signs, and she asked me if I would be the closing keynote at their outside sales conference. I did that, and one of the franchisees came backstage and said, "Hey, look, I've got a company, and we are deploying people into the network as graphic designers and project managers and sales admin, and we're sourcing them globally." So it was a really good business model that was based on royalties, didn't take any capital investment. And I decided to become CEO of Sagan Sign Talent.
You mentioned that you took a little bit of time off. I mean, you're like a man who's done a million things, and shockingly, the vast majority of them pretty well, pretty successful. You ran for a few things in California.
Yeah.
And man, I mean, if you want to have some pie on your face, run for office. If you want to have tomatoes thrown at you, run for office.
Yeah.
So the first question is, why run? Why not let someone else fix it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wanted to leverage the office to do good work. Like I was never interested in the actual governing piece to actually what I could do in that position. I was excited about if I have this role and this stature in the community, I can go raise money for kids to help them create the Long Beach College Prep Academy, which we ended up doing. I can use this to leverage it to go help kids that looked like me that needed opportunities. And having that position, it gives you the credibility to talk to the higher net worth people in those local communities, and they'll want to work with you. It's different than cold calling them and just having a background as being a football player. So I really looked at running for office to help people in that way. And then I got to a point where I had good ideas, John. I know I was poor, right? I know what it takes to get out of poverty. And I've seen all these plans that people had, and I had my vision of what it takes. And my number one policy was in the early 1900s, people in America only went to school through 8th grade. And then there was a high school movement as we went through the great industrialization. And so then we had high school, and that's when we started getting a lot of vocations. And what we have now is that we graduate about 3.6 million students per year in high school, and they're only qualified to go work at a Dunkin' Donuts, minimum wage work. And so one of my policies that I really advocated for was moving to from K-12 to K-14, where you finished through community college, because our community colleges all have 30 to 35 trades, or you can get an associate's degree for being there 2 years. So it will reduce the debt that you'd have to pay going to a 4-year school after that, only 2 years. And so I was a strong advocate of saying cut foreign aid, 10% across the board. We were spending about 50 billion. We could take $5 billion and go pay for all of our kids. It'd only take about 3 billion to pay for all of our kids annually to finish through community college. And now when they finish, they can finish with a career, because everyone shouldn't go to a 4-year school. You can finish with a trade, radiology, technician. You can be a carpenter, a glazer, et cetera. Or you finish with an associate's degree, which puts you on track to get your 4-year degree with less debt as you move forward. So I knew that a skill set was the only thing that got me out of poverty. So I'm a strong advocate for that. I hope one day that somebody could champion that, because I'm no longer in the political world.
How do you help someone who has no vision or hope? It's another word you love for their life. Discover a vision and tap into hope for their life. And
You,
I see this question to you really in two ways. One is that kid who grew up in the trailer next to you. You haven't met him yet, but he's there right now. How does she discover it? And secondly, for someone listening to our conversation and they're older and they're experienced and they've got a life and everything else, and they have no real vision right now, and they're losing that whisper, that light of hope.
yeah. The best way I can explain it is that there are some things that are caught and not taught. And so eventually you're around someone and you start to hear things that you resonate with, and something awakens in you and something arises in you, and it makes you want to have that. And maybe it's different and it shows up different in your life, but you have to be around people that dream. You have to be around people who have vision. That's one way to do it. The other way is you see something and you see people operating out in the world, and they're not even in your world. They're not the motivational speaker that came and spoke with you. They're not the person that you met along the way. You see, like I saw Tony Dorsett on television, and you're looking for something, and you see that's where I want to show up, and it sparks. And I believe this, John. I truly believe this. The visions that we get, the dreams that we have, those are just trailers to what our future can be. Those are movie previews of what we can achieve in life. And we typically have them around the gift sets that we actually have. And all the dreams that I've had they've played out, and they have been the things that I saw when I was younger, not things completely different than that. So I would say part of it is catching it, whether you're catching it in person and being around people, or whether you're catching it by seeing people operate in the world. I'll say this, there's a biblical story about David and Jonathan. Jonathan was Saul's son, King Saul. And it talks about Jonathan seeing David go into battle, and he fell in love with him when he saw him go into battle. So there was something that he saw, and the way that he moved and the way that he operated, that made him connect with him. And you can't teach that. You have to be in the moment and feel that. You have to be in the moment and catch that. And so when you try to give someone a dream, bring them around dreamers. And that's the first place that I would say to start.
Man, I wrote down a whole bunch of your quotes, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but some of them just are too good for you not to expand upon a little bit. Here comes the first. My success in business has ended poverty for every person who will come after me and
Yeah.
every future generation of the Dunn family.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody had gotten out of poverty. Everybody was graduating high school and moving right back in. But now I know the formula, right? And so, like my children, my daughter now, I have a 17-year-old that's getting ready to go to Claremont McKenna. Why? Because I knew that the environment that your kids are around matters. The parents of those children and the jobs that they have will impact what your children see that they can possibly do. And I knew that because I went to Stanford as well, around people who wanted to be doctors and lawyers and president and Supreme Court justices and CEOs of major companies. Having that vision has now allowed me to transfer that into my daughter, and now she's going to college, and I have a 5-year-old, and she's going to go to school, and she's going to see these parents, and she's going to have friends with expectations of going to college. We are the average of the 5 people we hang out with the most. The Bible would say a companion of wise men grows wise, a companion of fools is destroyed. And my grandmother would say, if you sleep with dogs, you're going to wake up with fleas. But it all comes back to the central premise that the people that you are around, you become like those who you spend the most time with.
We cannot escape our expectations. They either
Yeah.
propel us forward or they hold us back.
Yeah, you can't escape them. I have a 17-year-old daughter and I have to talk to her about real life stuff. And she's in that phase where she's dating and stuff like that. And you have to have the sex talk. And, I told her, listen, a guy will rise to your lowest expectation. If you will sleep with him on a first date, he'll do that. If you will make him wait and you have honor and you have character, you have integrity, then he'll wait. You have to have high expectations. You can't escape your expectations. If you have low expectations, you're going to meet them. And when you meet those low expectations, you're going to get the results of having those low expectations. It's very hard to rise above your highest expectation. You can rise above the expectations of your community and your macro environment and your socioeconomic status, but you can't rise above your own expectations. You can't hit targets that you're not willing to aim at. You're not going to drift into success. You're not going to wake up tomorrow and say, "Oh wow, I've made $1 million and I've started a brand new company and I've written a book or I've started a podcast like John O'Leary." Like, if you don't start setting a plan to have a podcast and you start having meetings about it and you put your team together and you start thinking about the content you're going to have and can you start booking people, you're not going to just randomly drift into that. Your dreams are not self-executing. You
Right.
have to have a vision, you have to have a plan, and then you got to move in that direction.
Awesome. Two more. Despite these achievements, and you're talking about the things you've accomplished in your life, this is what you wrote. I've never forgotten what it's like to go to sleep hungry and to wake up with a sense of hopelessness.
Yeah, there's a
Tell me why you haven't forgotten that, and tell me why it's empowering today to remember it.
Yeah, I think that you can really relate to this because of the life journey that you've had and the pain and the scarring. There are things on a subconscious level that get so driven into who you are as a person that you never forget what it's like to be hungry. You'll never forget the pain that you went through or the insecurity that you had or the depression that you went through. Like the things that I've gone through, I remember it. And it informs me on a visceral level, right? What I feel in a moment. I'm still willing to eat a mayonnaise sandwich if I have to. I'm still willing, to grind and to work for it. And the people who don't have to grind and you don't have to work for it, which is the hardest thing I'm teaching my children, you don't have that reminder of how those markers in your life, those altars in your life that you left behind to remember that this was the place where this happened. This was the place of poverty, and it drives you and it makes you hungry and it makes you want to continue to push forward. It makes you want to help other people who are in it. To me, it's just this deeply subconscious part of your brain that's been routed so much so that you can never forget it, and it inspires you every day. For me, it does. There's just people who, when you deal with hard times growing up, man, you just have a different perspective on what it takes to get to where you want to go, and you can never forget that kind of work and where you came from.
Well, I forget the exact expression, but the first generation fights for it and grows it. The second generation expands it. The third generation loses it. When we
Yeah,
become comfortable,
yeah,
we become almost compliant and slowly losing what everybody else before us built up.
yeah.
So your final quote that I'm going to ask you about today is this one. I love it. So I've got good news and bad news for you. The good news is the life you've always wanted is waiting for you.
Yeah.
The bad news is the life you've always wanted is waiting for you.
Yeah. It's not self-executing. The life you want is not self-executing. And no one's going to come and hold your hand and say, Damon, this is how you get out of the trailer. And this is how you go to Stanford. And this is how you have good study habits. You have to go. It's left to you. You got to get on the journey. You got to get moving. You will not know everything you need to know before you get started. But if you get started and you start moving towards the goals that you want, hey, and if you don't know which way to go, just start moving. And if you realize you're going the wrong direction, turn around and go the other direction. And at least you figured out now what direction to go, but you learn along the journey. No one's coming from you. And so that's what that reminds me of, is that if you sit around and you just wait and you have no plans and you have no actions and you hope to drift into some type of opportunity, it's never going to happen. That's why it's the bad news. Your opportunities are waiting on you. It's your habits. It's your ability to operate above motivation. You can't be motivated enough to achieve your goals. 90% of it is going to be discipline. When you don't feel like it, when you don't want to actually grind, when you don't want to make it A, when you don't want to do all the homework and you don't want to work out, if you're trying to lose weight and if you're trying to improve your health, it's what you do when you don't feel like doing it that makes all the difference in you achieving it. And a lot of people are not willing to be consistent enough, to be disciplined enough to actually operate beyond the motivation that you have. And so I say the life you've always wanted, man, it's out there for you and it's waiting on you. And that's the good news. But the bad news is the life that you've always wanted is out there waiting on you. And it's waiting on you.
Amen. It's so good. So, Damon, we have 7 questions that tether all of our guests together.
Okay.
We
I
call
love
them the
this.
Live Inspired Seven, man. I think you're competent of walking the gauntlet with me, man. So
Let's do
get your
this.
football cleats on. Here we go. You may need a helmet and some pads.
On,
What's been the
coach.
most impactful book you've ever read?
Well, that's a great question. I hate to say this, but it's true. It's the Bible because, and I say this with all sincerity and without being, I'm not just giving you a half-hearted answer. Where I grew up, I didn't have a father and I didn't have a mother. And my grandmother would take me to church because I was the baby. And my uncles, they couldn't go to church. They had to be on the farm and do all the work that we had. And at church, it was the only place that I heard positive messages to be able to interpret the pain I was going through. So forget about the supernatural, forget about any of the spiritual, just on a horizontal human level, having someone tell me that you don't have to have a father, that God can show up in different ways with football coaches and have people mentors in your life, and what you're going through, you're going to gain wisdom and you're going to be able to apply that wisdom and character and develop other people when you get older. So you're going to learn from this. So I heard these messages that helped me interpret my pain, and it truly happened. My mess has now become my message. And I learned that by early on being in church and reading the Bible.
Is there, because the Bible seems like a thick book. So one of
Yeah.
my friends might say, okay, Damon, we understand, but is there a book within that book that you recommend we turn to first?
Yeah, I would. I would say John. You can't get past the first gospel. I mean, that's where it all starts. Is, in the beginning, though, it was the word, and the word became flesh. And then really it's the life of Jesus beyond that. It's all the parables that he used. It's the parable of the talents where he gave one guy 5 and one guy 3 and one guy 1. The guy with 1 only dug it into the ground and kept it. The guy with 3 turned it into 5. The guy with 5 turned it into 10. And then the ruler came back and said, I'm going to take the 1 from you and give it to the one with the 10. What that taught me is that God cares about your productivity. It's not just go live a happy life. No, no, no. I'm going to give you gifts and talents, and how you work it in this world, it matters. And so lessons like that are what you're going to find throughout the Gospels. You got to start with the Gospels.
Awesome, man. And I think the word love shows up more in John than the other 3 combined.
Yeah.
What's one positive characteristic or one trait that you possessed as a little kid growing up in Texas that you wish you exhibited as brilliantly today?
I was tougher then.
Hmm.
Living a life of wealth, living a life of having all the things that I want. It makes you softer. When I was a kid, I was eating mayonnaise sandwiches. And there were times you would go to bed hungry. I was the sixth one to take a bath in the same bath water. So I had this ability to just to grind it out when I was younger. And you get older now, and I don't know if I could take a bath after 6 people took a bath in it. Like I've lost some of my grit and toughness from that perspective. Mentally, I've kept it all, but yeah, I would say that the toughness that I had growing up, the ability to weather poverty, the ability, and a lot of it, you didn't really know you were poor. So there's a difference there, because when you're poor and there's a lot of love around you, you don't recognize the poverty until you get older and you kind of look back and you're like, wow, we were really, really poor. So
Right.
the toughness, the mental toughness, being that age to weather poverty, I was a lot better at that then than I would be now.
Damon, if your home caught fire and all living things are out, animals, spouse, kids, you have an opportunity of running in and grabbing one item. What's that one physical thing you come racing back outside with?
Honestly, I wouldn't come in and grab nothing. There's just nothing beyond my wife and our animals that I care enough about to go in and risk my life, or even to go in and grab it. Like, I can lose it all and I would be fine. Everything in this house I could just live without.
Anything from your childhood. A lot of times when my friends respond like that, I probe them a little bit farther and then they come up with something.
I have a picture of my dad and a picture of me at the same age, and
Wow.
and so we both were. He was getting ready. He got a football scholarship at the University of Texas, and the coach was coming in to shake his hand, and he had his shirt off, and I have a picture of that and a picture of me in the same era of my life, and that would be the one prized possession that I would come back to get.
This is off script, but I think it's appropriate. Have you made amends and forgiven your dad for being who he was for the first 3 years of your life before departing?
Um, no, that's no, and I hate that I have to admit to that, but if you don't have a father, it's hard to understand it.
Totally.
The hurt when you grow up. Every Father's Day, no one's thinking about you because you have a father, and they're all celebrating their fathers. But even to this day, you don't have a father. It's almost like when you're adopted. We see this on television a lot. Adopted kids will go look for their parents, and you want to know who you are. You want to know what your legacy is. But I don't have any such opportunity to do so. And the things that I've heard, unfortunately, that my parents told me that he didn't want me. I mean, he was 15, 16 years old, but those things stay with you. And there's a pain that you deal with throughout the course of your life. And it's unresolved for me, if I'm being very honest with you. And I hate to say that I haven't forgiven him because I'm such a forgiving person, but man, it sucked my whole life not having a dad, and it still sucks today. And I wish I knew that part of my identity,
Mm.
and I wish I had a better answer for you, but no, I haven't done that work yet.
I think it's the perfect answer. It's an honest answer. It's the right one for today. And a lot of times when I'm on a podcast, they'll flip these questions on me, and they'll ask me the most impactful book I've ever read. And for me, it's actually a Henry Nouwen book called The Return of the Prodigal Son.
Wow.
And it's, Luke, it's about this boy
Yeah.
who wishes his father's death ultimately, but then comes home and is forgiven. And the ultimate invitation within that parable and within the book is we will not always see this side of eternity, what a good dad looks like, but we are called to become that for others. And I
Yeah.
think it's so cool, Damon, that here you are, this kid in a trailer with uncles around, with no dad around at all, but you became what you did not get. Like that,
Yeah.
that is a really difficult thing to accomplish. So I celebrate you for that.
But you know what? You know what? Right when you say that, you know what I think of? The prodigal son going off and squandering all of his wealth, his inheritance that his dad gave him. But then when he came home, his dad opened up his arms and then accepted him and said, "Bring the fatted calf and give him the signet ring and put a nice coat on him." And I think of me not having that opportunity. And so it's
Right.
always with me, right? Not having a dad. Like I went immediately to that. That's something that if you don't have a father, you don't know that hurts, and that you go to every time something like that happens.
Well, now, welcome to the Damon Dunn, John O'Leary therapy couch, but we're going to hang out on the couch for a minute longer. The way Nouwen described the book, though, is why would Jesus describe the Father as the Father? Like, what, God is certainly larger than male. So
Yeah.
why describe him as the prodigal father and son? And it was because he said very specifically in the book, because so many folks like you won't have any idea what a real dad looks like, but you got one in heaven. You got one waiting for you. And that is
Yeah.
good news. So although you didn't see him in living flesh,
Yeah.
you have the promise of that for eternity. And like in that book, it unpacks so beautifully, and it draws a comparison with Rembrandt's painting of the return of the prodigal son. And one more thing on that, and then even the way Rembrandt painted it, he painted that twice. The first was when he had the world, kids and wealth and status and everything, and he painted it, and it's a boring painting. The second time is after he lost his wife, he lost his children, he lost his status, he lost his wealth, was losing his health, and he painted it one more time. And it's that one that hangs in St. Petersburg, Russia, because it is a masterpiece. And so
Wow.
sometimes you got to lose in order to discover what is.
Man.
And man, you've been on that journey, and now you're teaching your kids what is.
Yeah. Man, open the doors of the church right now. If you want to give your life to God, come. John O'Leary just preached the greatest sermon of all time. Good word,
More on
man. Yeah,
Sunday, people. Come on back for the Sunday service. It's even better, dude. All right. If you could sit on a bench on a gorgeous day and have a long conversation with anyone living or deceased, Damon, who do you want next to you?
my wife.
That's awesome.
Without a doubt. My best friend, she puts the mirror in front of me, and it forces you to grow. It's the greatest gift God's ever given me. She comes from a family that is whole. You know, parents have been married for 40 plus years. They have extended family. Everyone gets together on a regular basis. And I purposely moved here to be near her family so we could plant my daughter into that world, because I want to give her that gift, because I grew up in a world where it's just me, my mom, and my sister now. And we
Mm.
don't spend time with any extended family. And so, without a doubt, the greatest gift that God's ever given me has been my wife.
What's the best advice your wife, your dad, your mom, some coach, an uncle, or anyone else ever gave you?
Coach Ty Willingham. And this advice that he's given me has been, um, it's subtle, but it's been some of the most important wisdom I've ever had. He said, "Dunn, a hint to the wise is sufficient." You can learn from other people's mistakes. You can learn from other people's successes. We can learn from our own mistakes, and we can learn from our own successes. But he said, a hint just a hint to the wise is sufficient. So I'm always looking to be able to find information that can allow me to go to the next level, because you can always better your best. And so I'm always looking for those hints of opportunities to grow, those hints of opportunities. Like today, you know what the hint was today? It's time for me to do the work to forgive my father. I haven't thought about that. No one's challenged me on that. It never came as a direct question to me. And then eventually, when you said it, it it um it may it made me realize that I need to do that work. And so I really appreciate you for that.
Dude, I told you before we recorded that I loved you and that I'm grateful and that I feel like I have a brother seated across from me. And so I'm not at all surprised to hear that near the end of the conversation, we're breaking down and we're spilling secrets that we rarely even think about, let alone talk about. And I have that same guy who wrote The Prodigal Son wrote this. What is most private and personal is most universal and applicable. I'm going to say that again because this is like a nugget, dude. What is most private and personal? Some kid in a trailer in Texas, completely different than you, not being raised or loved by his dad. What is so unique to you is also, this is the beauty of this podcast and life, is also most universal and applicable. So just the fact that you went there and you owned it and now you shared that this is a scar you want to work through, like, yes, it's a blessing, I hope, for you and your kids. But dude, you blessed our whole community tonight.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate you having me on.
And I got two more questions before I let you off, so hang on for a minute longer. Age 20, what advice do you wish that 20-year-old might receive?
That you have to reverse engineer your life. You have to create blueprints to where you want to go. You have to find people that are doing the things you want to do. And you have to read about them, or you have to study them on YouTube videos. You have to see if you can go meet with them and learn from them. And then you take 6 to 8 blueprints and you put together your first plan. And then you work on that and you grow from that as you're working on that plan, that you're only as good as your plan. And you don't know enough in your own life to get to where it is that you want to go, and you got to get going. And so you got to reverse engineer the outcome that you want. And if I knew that then, I wouldn't have wasted so much time with the things that I've wasted time on.
Damon Dunn, it has been said that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. How would you like yours to read?
He never stopped growing and never stopped learning.
Damon, son, husband, father, football player, business owner, faith leader, and champion for others. Thank you for never stopping to grow and never stopping to become the best version of yourself. You've inspired us during this episode.
Thank you. I enjoyed myself, man. Thank you so much for having me on, John.
My friends, that is the great Damon Dunn. My name is John O'Leary, and today is our day. What a gift. Live inspired. My friends, there are so many nuggets within today's conversation with Damon Dunn. One of my favorites out of a long laundry list of favorites is that leadership lessons in life are caught rather than taught. The very first time I actually heard it said just like this from Damon was on this here Live Inspired podcast, baby, way back at episode number 15. If you haven't been back there lately, let me encourage you strongly to check it out. It's an episode with a friend of mine, a guy I also consider a brother. His name is Mike Matheny. Matheny at the time was the manager for the St. Louis Cardinals. He went on to become the manager for the Kansas City Royals. He's done some remarkable things in his life since. And what he knew to be true early in his career and still right now in the midst of his career is this, that leadership, that life lessons are caught, not taught. They're modeled, in other words. I want to thank you for being part of our Live Inspired podcast community. I want to thank you for being part of our channel. If you benefited from today's episode, and how could you not, do me a big old favor. Don't just live like Dunn. I hope that's part of it, but also make sure you share this message where you work, where you worship, where you work out, where you party. Let them know that you tune into the Live Inspired podcast channel, and so should they. My friends, for this time, and until next time, my name is John O'Leary, and today is your day. What a gift. Live inspired. Keeley Companies was started almost 50 years ago by the one and only Larry Keeley. What started as a small family-owned paving company in St. Louis has grown to a nationally known full-service construction, development, and restoration partner. Larry the Legend, as he is affectionately known, has been a part of this growth every step of the way and continues to provide guidance as his son Rusty, my buddy, drives their vision and achieves results on purpose. His unwavering foundation of a family culture with a focus on people has gotten Keeley Companies to where they are today, and their journey is truly just beginning. To learn more about Larry the Legend and Keeley Companies, check them out at KeeleyCompanies.com.